And the Dutch-speaking Belgians laughed in the Walloons' faces. They said, "Ha ha ha, you Walloons, you sound ridiculous. We up our noses at you." And then whoever they lost the war to, who's, forcing these reparations upon these poor Belgians, because I'm assuming it was some Hitler-type character. "Aha, you Dutch speakers, you don't get off quite so easily. You shall be called the Flemish." We need to take a picture of this at some point.
Our recording setup.
In the unlikely scenario in which we become wildly popular, I would want to be able to show people our extremely janky,
humble beginnings.
Yeah.
Or our humble future.
Right.
So this is a very special episode that I'm not sure will ever see the light of day.
Okay.
Because we're totally improvising it. And this is a topic that I researched briefly, but found that I didn't understand and pegged for doing more research later. And I didn't do more research later. So we're just going to let it fly and see what happens. I was looking up obscure vehicles.
Hold on. I know you're really excited to get into the topic.
Right.
But do you want to talk about do you want to say our name?
What's happening and what my name is?
People are just, sounds are coming into their ears right now.
And they don't know.
I don't know. What is this? Is it a podcast?
So we've got to nail this down for them before, it gets worse.
Yeah.
I'm Thomas.
Oh no, don't confuse them.
I'm Thomas.
Yeah.
He's Ben.
I'm Thomas.
I'm Ben. It's open to interpretation.
This is a podcast called Obscurigami. We didn't even say the episode number in the last episode.
No. So it could be any episode.
Although
Except 47, that's designated.
Right. Yeah. But this one is probably 5 until we delete it. And then it'll be not 5.
Then it'll be one of the lost episodes.
The next one will be 5. Yeah.
It's good to be lost here with you, Thomas.
Well, thanks, Ben. It's good to be back after a long break in between episodes like this.
It is tough to go so long without recording, but
once we finally release these, it's going to be so weird if we get any sort of feedback or anything, because the lead time will be just so outrageous.
I do feel like it would be weird if we got any feedback. I would be exceptionally weirded out.
I'm gonna
stop you right there.
I would be about as weirded out if anybody actually listens to this after we upload it.
Right.
As I would if somebody somehow listened to it prior to us.
If you're listening to episode 5, the lost episode.
Right.
You've reached the pinnacle of your hipsterhood, because
you should be on we should be doing an Obscurigami podcast about you,
because you, sir or madam.
Well, they should just come on and talk about all the obscure things they found, because somehow they managed to find these incredibly obscure, unknown, unlistened to things.
That's definitely a thing.
I did have a little bit of a crisis about the last episode, because I realized that Planet Money, which is a big NPR podcast, did an episode about yapstones.
Oh.
But then I was like, well, just because somebody else has talked about it doesn't mean it's not obscure.
Right.
So.
And NPR.
Not everybody listens to NPR.
Right. It's kind of an obscure thing, right? Yeah. NPR. Nobody listens to NPR.
Planet Money, it's not, Planet Money, it's only in the top 100 podcasts on iTunes. It's not like anybody listens to that. So.
Right, yeah. Nobody listens to podcasts. That's what I'm saying.
That's why this is the perfect medium.
The number 1 podcast has 10 people that listen to it?
Yeah, at most, I would think.
And some of those are in Yap.
Right.
So
Yappies. That's why this is the perfect medium for a show that is about obscure things. And
it's the perfect medium for people like us who are just really clueless.
Yeah.
I think.
I think the greatest asset of talking about really obscure things is that there's going to be way less people who will call us out on our mistakes.
Right.
When we, forget something or misstate something or
Right.
mispronounce something. We're not talking about popular things, and so there's going to be less people,
Right.
presumably, who are going to be like, ooh,
Right.
that factoid about yapstones, very incorrect.
Yeah.
So that's my safety net. Hopefully. Anyway, go to obscurigami.com to download the episodes.
Now that we've like ragged on NPR,
Right. Yeah, why would anybody listen to NPR? I don't know.
You all should be listening to NPR instead of this. What are you doing with your lives?
Yeah, if you haven't listened to our previous episode, don't. I recommend going and subscribing to Planet Money. They did an episode about
Yapstones.
Yapstones. I haven't listened to it, but I'm assuming it's much better than our episode about it.
A yapstone, it's like a kidney stone that talks.
Yeah.
Except not.
So now that we've padded this out a little bit, we might be
By quite a lot.
By quite a lot, we might be able to go into your topic and still do an episode.
Here's a topic for you. I was researching obscure automobiles.
Okay. Yes.
And this particular one is the Chrysler Turbine car. It is
Right.
powered by a gas turbine engine, which is the main distinguishing feature about this car. And I'm still a bit confused about how gas turbine engines work. And that's my main
That's your main point.
that's my main hang up is I don't really understand.
Give me a little some background factoids about this car.
Okay, well, it's
when and
manufactured
where.
by Chrysler, which is
Right.
not an obscure brand.
Yeah.
And it was made in the early 60s. The body of it is designed by an Italian coachmaker named Ghia that also did the Volkswagen Carbon Ghia.
It's a slick looking car.
It is not an ugly car.
It's a 2-door.
And it's classified on Wikipedia here as a concept car, but there was actually a few production cars that were made and sold. It's
The turbine, I'm reading now from Wikipedia.
Yes.
The turbine car had some operational and aesthetic drawbacks. The car sounded like a giant vacuum cleaner, which was unexpected to consumers.
Yeah, see, when I first started researching this, most of what I encountered seemed very positive. It was like it can run on things besides gasoline. Like you don't have to get it on gasoline.
Right.
You could run it like the president
JP4 jet fuel,
right?
apparently.
Vegetable oil.
Vegetable
is
oil.
a big one. And the president of Mexico actually ran it on tequila. He liked it and bought one. And then after having it tested by the Chrysler engineers to make sure that it wouldn't do anything strange or blow up
Yeah.
when you put tequila in it, he just put some tequila in it and took it for a drive. So I was like, well, why wouldn't you want a car that could run on almost anything? And so I started doing a little bit more research into gas turbine engines and discovered that actually, if you look at there's a way that you can actually put vegetable oil into a diesel engine and run your diesel engine.
Right.
If you have a certain type of one.
I have heard of that.
But it's not better for the environment necessarily. It is in one sense in that diesel fuel has more harmful byproducts to the environment, but the emissions from your car with vegetable oil can actually be worse than the emissions from a modern engine, because there's so many regulations on modern engines. But most people who convert their biodiesel engines to run vegetable oil are using older engines. And so that was one of the concerns with, in addition to it sounding like a vacuum cleaner, one of the issues with the Chrysler turbine car was that it didn't meet emission regulations even for that time.
Wow. Yeah, which I guess probably weren't
that
too
strict. Yeah.
So
it definitely never hit the right balance. And there's also issues with like throttling, like getting the acceleration that people want in an automobile.
It sounds like it seems like there was just a lot of aspects of the car that weren't necessarily bad so much as just different or inverse of what you might find in a regular car.
Yeah.
So like the you know, you could accelerate cold with no adverse effects, and accelerating cold would actually have the reverse effect of like revving a cold engine in a piston car, in that instead of warming up the engine, it would have, I guess, a cooling effect. That didn't really cause problems. It didn't damage the engine, but like the vacuum cleaner sound, it just wasn't really what people
wasn't acceptable to the consumer
were expecting, which is apparently a big deal in cars. These days, with a lot of electric cars and quieter cars, they often are adding car sounds back into cars because there's so much expectation about what a vehicle should sound like and how it should operate.
And there's a big push now to put luxury features into cars.
Right.
Even in like cars that should be like practical, like pickup trucks and things that you would think of as being more utilitarian are including more and more like comfort features, like, you know, radios and comfortable seating, suspension, things that once upon a time you wouldn't think of as being in your pickup truck. So
seemed like one of the big downsides was regular leaded gas that you would have gotten from a pump in that era would be damaging to the engine, which seems like that would be a pretty big obstacle to overcome for it being successful in the market.
Yeah, definitely.
Had it made it that far.
So I found a really good discussion about my question, why gas turbine engines haven't been implemented into automobiles.
Right.
Because like you would think, well, leaded gasoline, we don't use leaded gasoline anymore.
Right.
So, or at least. And,
you know, probably the emissions problem could be overcome.
Right. So like, why don't we? So on the lovely website, physicforums.com, I found some discussion of this subject. And they do mention that they require very high RPMs to get the sort of throttle response that you would need for a driving automobile.
It said the 4th generation Chrysler turbine engine ran at up to 44,000 revolutions per minute.
Right. That's very high.
Which is quite high. But apparently that's a feature of turbine engines, because you need that kind of...
Gas turbine engines are used in, like, to power, like, the M1 Abrams tank.
Right.
For instance. Which is, like, a vehicle that needs a lot of torque and a lot of energy just to get it moving.
Right. But not a lot of variance in...
Right. So they've been used in that and in, like, boats and airplanes pretty regularly, but like they've never made the transition to like automobiles or even like trucks and transporters, which I think would be a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why. There was one that was manufactured by Jaguar as a concept car, and it was featured in one of the Bond films, one of the more recent Daniel Craig Bond films. And it was intended to be a production car, but they actually nixed it because of the financial crisis. So the auto manufacturers are like still kind of looking into it, but for whatever reason, since this car and from the early 60s and even before that, it's just never taken off.
I know you're not a, physicist, mechanic, but do you have an understanding of the basic sort of distinct differences and benefits of a gas turbine engine over a piston engine design?
Well, like the engine,
what about it would make it superior?
The benefit that struck me right away was that you could use other types of fuel.
Right.
Like, you didn't have to depend on one source.
Yeah.
But one of the physicists who I was reading from says that some of the advantages are that the top speed and overall power to weight ratio is much higher than it would be with any type of piston driven car. So theoretically you would be able to drive faster, and it would operate more efficiently at high speed than a piston driven car, and you would have more torque, obviously, which is why it's used in the Abrams tank. So those are some of the advantages.
Yeah.
The disadvantages that he mentions, this is a user who goes by Mr. Dynamics, I believe. Yeah, Mr. Dynamics. Seems to be an acknowledged user of this forum. The disadvantages are the ones that I already mentioned, like the throttle and the noise that you mentioned, is pretty much the major drawbacks. But a lot of people on here, Mr. Dynamics included, seem to think that there's a possibility that it would be good to look into it again, because it is potentially more efficient than a gasoline engine. Ultimately, the gas piston engine is more thermally efficient and also better to produce, and really neither one compares with the energy efficiency of an electric car.
Right.
Like, that's kind of the direction that the industry is headed.
Yeah.
And so, like, for that reason, auto manufacturers, I think, are steering away from it.
R&D resources are being put into electric, if anything, at this point.
Yeah. And there's a marketing niche for that,
Yeah.
where, like, people are looking for that and they know what it is. And
I feel like ultimately...
whereas a more efficient gas engine...
Yeah. There's
which technically doesn't exist
Right.
yet, because it hasn't been developed. Like, the experts seem to acknowledge that there is a possibility that you could make it more efficient, but it's not there yet.
Yeah. And the other upsides that you would get with a gas turbine engine, such as the ability to use multiple types of fuels, that's...
Not necessarily a benefit.
I mean, that is a benefit, because, like, theoretically it's a benefit. On paper it's a benefit, but, like, for most people in America or a first world country where cars are used heavily, like, getting gas, the availability of fuel is not a problem.
And I mean, I actually did a little quick math in my head when I was researching this, and I was like, actually, like, vegetable oil is probably not cheaper per gallon
Right.
than gasoline anyway.
Everything I've heard about people who have, like, converted diesel engines or whatever, who were running on that, it was worth it because they had a resource where they could get used vegetable oil,
Right.
like a restaurant that had fryers, and, you know, and they
that needed to be recycled, or
right, and they could get it for free or very cheap. So yeah, it's one of those things that, like, if you have that resource, it could be very beneficial for you, but most people aren't like, oh, like, I couldn't find any gasoline, what am I gonna do?
Which, an article about that I read said that it's actually illegal technically to do that, to convert your biodiesel car to... Well, it seems kind of weird to me. I didn't actually look up the law and the statute, but it's weird to me because the EPA bans it and slaps a fine on you if they catch you, but there are websites out there that will sell you a kit.
Right.
And, like, they're operating, functioning businesses, and there's, like, clubs of people that do it, and, like, as a hobby. So I guess there's, like, a line between doing it and getting caught, or I guess there's, like, limitations on the power of the EPA to actually, like, enforce that.
Yeah.
Because they're not, like, a law creating institution, like, they're a regulation driven institution. So, like, if you break a regulation...
Well, and it might just be one of those things like piracy where, the difficulty of enforcing it.
But, like, I don't know, motor vehicles are, like, so heavily regulated and controlled. I mean, you smell like French fries when you drive around in it,
Right.
because it smells like used cooking oil.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it can't be, it's not easy to hide.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I can't imagine that your average state trooper is going to write you up for driving.
Smelling like French fries. Right. Yeah, well, see, it's not a law if it's a regulation.
Right. Right.
So, like, the EPA can't, like, make a law
Yeah.
itself.
So apparently the Chrysler turbine car in 1963 was not the first, at least the first gas turbine concept car.
Yes.
In 1954, there was a Fiat Turbina, which is a very catchy name, which also had a gas turbine. That one, only ran at a measly 22,000 RPMs.
Measly.
Yeah, compared to Chrysler's 44,000. And even before that, Rover was the very first, had a gas turbine experimental car called the Jet 1. And that was in 1945. It's
not a new...
It's an idea that quite a few people have played with.
But it never really seems to get beyond the concept stage, which is what kind of caught my attention to it. I think this particular car caught my attention because it actually made it so far as to have a few production quote-unquote models.
Right. Yeah, the Fiat Turbina was shelved because it had high fuel usage and overheating problems. It seems like that was the same problem the Rover Jet 1 ran into. Interesting little factoid, the Turbina held the record for the lowest drag coefficient for 30 years after its production.
Well, it's running on like a jet engine.
Yeah, and it has
basically,
its design seems like it's
got that nice
it
little
utilizes that
wind scoop on the front of it. It's a pretty car. It's much prettier than the Chrysler.
Yeah.
But go figure. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they invested a lot of money into the design of it. Like, Kia was not a inexpensive way to go for coach building. After they decided to put an end to it, they actually recalled all the cars, and most of them were destroyed, except for 4 or 5. There's some conflicting reports. But there's only a few left in existence. They're mostly in museums.
I wonder what the reasoning behind that was.
I believe it just had to do with the overall inefficiency.
Yeah,
but it seems like they were pretty deep into an investment.
Right, but I'm just wondering what drives the motivation to recall and destroy them.
Yeah. It says here tax and liability reasons.
Yeah.
That quote comes from Jay Leno, who is one of the owners of one of the very few cars that there are.
Apparently Rover went on to develop on the Jet 1. It made a T2, T3, and T4, and it ran the T4 in a race in 1962, which it looks like was basically just like something Rover did purely for notoriety.
I had never thought about it before.
I never thought about car engines beyond piston, gas piston, and electric. But
people have tried.
It makes sense that people have tried other
a lot of different things. Yeah.
Well, cool.
And on that note, so, devoted listeners, you've made it through our destruction of the Chrysler turbine car.
Yes.
And for that, Wikipedia and the gods of randomization have provided
This is our segment where we hit the random button on Wikipedia and then talk about, whatever the heck it
The gods of randomness have provided you with a gem to make up for your suffering in the first half of the show. This is a list of caves located in Belgium.
I think really, like, people, this is a good episode because if we start getting some listeners, people are like, oh yeah, I could get into this, our listener base is growing a little bit.
Yeah.
We're becoming not quite so obscure.
Right.
People are going to hear this one hit that little unsubscribe button, keep things nice and
Right.
small. It's going to call the masses.
We'll keep it
And
to a cliquish.
only the true fans,
Only the true believers.
only the truest of listeners will continue on past the fateful episode 5.
Right.
Because they know episode 47 is coming.
Right. And they're holding out for it.
And they're holding out for the sheep. They're holding out for...
Yep.
They're holding out for that episode where I talk about light bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's a good one.
A lot to come.
We've already recorded
folks.
that one, actually. You listeners don't know that, but...
Yeah. So anyway, a list of caves in Belgium.
All of these caves in Belgium are located in Wallonia, which is one of Belgium's 3 regions, which if you are from Belgium... What is a person of Belgian?
A Belgian?
A Belgian? What would it be like Belgianese though?
I think it's the Belge. The Belge. Here, look. It should say in the go up a little. Country, Belgium. Yeah. Weird.
The Belges? The Belgites?
Look at the top paragraph. Maybe it'll say at the top.
See,
Belgians are made up of 2 main linguistic and ethnic groups: the Dutch speakers, called the Flemish, and the French speakers, called the Walloons. So if you think Belgians sound silly, have no fear. You have 2 choices. You can be either Flemish or a Walloon. Is Belgians too silly for you? Does Belgians sound ridiculous? Do you not like going around saying, "Hello, sir, I am a Belgian"? Have no fear. You can instead say, if you're speaking Dutch, you can say, "I am a Flem."
which might not sound as bad if you're speaking Dutch.
I am Flemish. Or if you're a French speaker, you can say, "Bonjour, I am a Walloon."
I think the random Wikipedia articles segment of the show has pretty much degraded into a segment where we unveil our ignorance about the world at large, as well as insult all the people groups of the world.
I've mispronounced Belgian,
Well, I
Flemish,
did.
or Walloon.
Are you sure? How many O's are in Walloon?
It's spelled Walloon. I don't know how else you could possibly pronounce it.
All these caves that are on this list that we've discovered are in Wallonia.
Right.
And I'm assuming that if you're from...
That's the predominantly French-speaking
Right, so you
region
must be a
of
Walloon
Right.
if you live in Wallonia.
Right.
But why wouldn't you be called a Wallone? Because you're not Wallone. You're with people.
Or a Wallonian.
Right.
No, they they were afraid it would be too dignified. Whoever came up with these names, I think clearly we've happened upon a segment of history that's been covered up somehow. Belgium at some point lost a war, and as part of the reparations, were forced to be called the Belgians. And furthermore, if you're a French-speaking Belgian, you must be referred to henceforth as a Walloon. There's also a third, tiny but constitutionally recognized group from 2 small German-speaking areas, but they have no name.
They have no name.
That to me indicates that it was in fact the Germans who enforced these reparations. Because otherwise they would have given those 2 German-speaking groups, goofy names.
Right.
Anyway, back to caves.
I just don't know what to do with that rant. You just ranted for like 10 minutes. No, you literally just made up the history of Belgium.
That's all this episode is going to be, Ben. I'm going to cut out the beginning where we talk about gas turbines.
You're just like, I don't even care about anything right now. I'm just gonna make up a story about Belgium and all the poor people that who are like completionists who are like, I'm gonna start this podcast episode and I'm gonna finish it.
I'm gonna redo the intro so people aren't confused. This is episode 5 of Obscurigami, where we talk about
I'm Ben.
I'm Thomas, and we're gonna talk about in this episode the Belgian war reparations. This is an undercover, investigative journalism piece. We're uncovering some historical
uncovering
something of historical significance
mysteries.
here
Yeah.
that's been covered over. Anyway, caves.
Caves. So this list of caves in Belgium, it doesn't even say that it's a list of all the caves in Belgium. It just says list of caves in Belgium.
It's a list of presumably significant caves.
Well, all these caves are in Wallonia, so I'm assuming, I don't know much about the topography of Belgium, but I'm assuming the Wallonian portion.
Honestly, I think the real takeaway here is that I think the real takeaway here is that two of the three regions in Belgium are in fact caveless.
Excuse me. I can't. Okay. What we determined during that fit of hysterical laughter was that only one region in Belgium has caves, and all the other regions of Belgium are presumably caveless.
Yeah. Do you want to mispronounce some of these?
I'm going to
caves?
mispronounce all of them. The caves of Han-sur-Lys.
Okay. Yeah.
The caves of Hotten, or Hoten. Grotte des Spy.
Yeah. I'm assuming some kind of spy hid there.
It is located near Spy in the municipality of Gemep-sur-Sambre, province of Namur, Belgium, above the left bank of the Orno River.
Oh, that I wasn't sure where
Does
it
that
was.
clarify anything for
But
you?
once you were like, oh, the left
And apparently,
bank, then I knew.
it has historical significance because there were a lot of Paleolithic digs that unveiled some early skulls of men.
Skull spy. Oh, that's quite the entrance right there.
Yes, it's this.
That's a very classical cave entrance. It's not every day you see a cave entrance like that.
The Spy. Well,
You
it
know.
is if you live if you live in Spy.
Apparently.
if you're a Walloon.
I wonder if the origin of the region of Spy, if there was a lot of spies in that area, and they named it that because of the high density of spies in the populace, or were the first spies from Spy, Belgium.
Is this what you wanted this podcast
everything
to be?
This is everything the random Wikipedia article segment hoped to be.
Should be. Well, we definitely got like our main objective in, which is to insult people groups of the world.
Oh, I thought it was to pad out this episode for another 15 minutes.
Well, I'm just gonna wrap up this list real quick.
Okay.
And then
I'll insert any other quips or little
Yes.
commentary I have.
I appreciate that. Grotte le Merveilleuse, probably not important to anybody. Nolette, the caves of Remarchamps, Grotte de Rosé, and Skladina, which, as we all know,
It's a
you
house.
should stay away from that funky cold Skladina. It's a picture of a house. Apparently there's a lot of ancient remains that have been recovered from Wallonia.
If you're a Walloon and you're listening to this podcast, or I guess if you're a Flemish, also, and you've just visited Wallonia and maybe been to one of these caves.
But if they're Flemish, we might not be able to read their email. We might have to run it through Google Translate, and then there's no hope of knowing what they're trying to say to us.
Same if they're Walloon. Also,
Right.
a lot of people in Europe, you're forgetting, Ben, a lot of people in Europe are bilingual.
That's true.
They might speak
I just
English.
want to throw out there that maybe we should just make it open-ended, where anybody who's been to this cave can send us feedback.
Right. So maybe you're French, you were on vacation visiting your Walloonish grandma, Walloon. I'll probably just intercut the second segment with the turbine segment.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of do like a little back and forth thing. I think that will really like increase clarity. Do like sort of a non-linear sort of thing.
It's good. Still more non-linear than Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Is it worth salvaging, or do we want to try again some other time?
So Ben, if people wanted to see, show notes with all the in-depth research we did for this episode,
Mm-hmm.
or, they wanted to find a place that they could contact us, or other episodes of this pod, or just, if they Google us, what's the website that would probably come up?
Probably, some sort of like counter-terrorism. Probably obscurigami.com, Thomas. It's a great resource for homeless cats to find homes. If you're a homeless cat, you can log on and set up an account.
If I had some this bit is only gonna work if I can play it dry, so
Right, go dry.
If I had some cat themed merchandise, would obscurigami.com be a good place for me to auction that off?
I think because of its feline based auctioneering system that's been highly engineered specifically to meet the needs of your cats, that it would be an ideal choice for you, Thomas.
Fantastic.
Additionally, the show notes are on there, and so is the podcast.
Great.
But that's sort of a side feature.
And probably a way to contact us.
Yes.
Also, or info@obscurigami.com.
Right.
You can email us.
That is one way that you can contact us.
You can call us if you know our phone numbers.
Right. If you know our phone numbers, please don't call us.
Walloon.
I can't understand the French.
I just don't understand.
It's a robot.
I just don't understand how that's offensive.
The French are a robot.
Robot.
That should play into your history.
Into my history,
Yeah. Well, the Germans
Robot
gave the
French.
Belgian people funny names,
Right.
and then they made the French people into a robot. Well, thank you for listening.
Yeah. I think if people have made it through this episode, it's all uphill from here.
Mm-hmm. It can only get better.
The show's only going to get better, so stick around, subscribe, download the future episodes. Also, highly recommend the previous episodes. They're all better than this one, too.
Pretty much. I think our work here is done.
Oh, gosh.